The Consumer Bankers Association is pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Disclosure Management Redefined, presented by NAHAS. My name is Isabella and it is my pleasure to facilitate today's event. Thank you for joining. Please note we are recording and all participant lines are muted. If you have any trouble, please email conferences@consumerbankers.com or send a message in the Q&A box. This presentation will last up to 60 minutes and will include question and answer opportunities at the end. You may submit a question at any time by entering the questions into the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, the views expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not represent the views of CPA or its members. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Rob Govil, CEO and founder of NAHAS, and Hayat Yahia, Principal Product Manager at NAHAS. Rob and Hayat, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us for this webinar, and we are looking forward to sharing some great information with you. And I'll let Hayat introduce herself.
Thank you for having us. It's an honor to be presenting today, and we're excited to share our learnings from one of our top banks' experience in disclosure management. And I had the pleasure to be part of the client and also part of NAHAS during that journey.
Yeah, that's been great. Hayat used to work actually for one of our clients, and now she's going to join us to actually be the product manager for disclosure management here. So here's our agenda for today. So I promise you we will take as little time as possible. We just have a couple of slides to introduce the company because there are several folks who might not know about NAHAS. So we just want to give you a quick overview, which will be 2 slides maximum. And then our goal is to take you through the disclosure management journey at one of the top 4 banks in the US. So the interesting thing about disclosure management is that we have at least 5 projects underway right now among the top 10 to 15 banks worldwide. And there's another kind of 5 that are about to start. So obviously, this subject seemed to have hit a chord with our customers and prospects. And there seemed to be a lot of desire to learn more about this area. And during this process, we will talk you through is why they started this project, how they went about executing on the vision, and what were the results they have gotten from doing this work. Feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll be monitoring the thread, and if something is relevant to what we are talking about at this time, we will try to address it along the way. As part of this presentation, we also have a couple of polling questions where we want to make it a little bit interactive for the audience. So you'll get a chance to give us some feedback on what are you doing with disclosure management within your respective organizations. And this will allow us to guide you a little better during this presentation. So that gives you a feeling for what our agenda is. Without further ado, we will get started. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So just a quick overview of NAHAS. NAHAS has been in business for closer to 15 years. Based here, as you can see from Hayat's Golden Gate Bridge image, out here in Palo Alto in California. If you have ever received an offer from any of the large banking institutions, right? Wells Fargo, Bank of America, other types of folks, right? Most of these offers were created in our system, they were approved in our system, and they were delivered through our platform in all the different channels they end up using, right? So 4 of the top 10 banks, 2 of the largest asset managers worldwide use our platform for doing a variety of use cases, and we will tell you about the use cases. However, Also included with these larger institutions, we have several mid to large institutions in the tier 1, in the tier 2, and tier 3 banks that also use our platform. But what's most important is we are only focused on the financial services sector. We do not work with in any other sector. So we specifically working with banks and asset managers. And over the years, as we have deployed our platform across these institutions, we have ended up partnering with lots of other providers to make sure we execute to your needs, right? And these providers fall into the category of, they could be system integrators like Gemini, TCS, or they could actually be providers like Salesforce, Pega, Adobe, Seismic. And last but not least, we're also driving standards in this area of disclosures across on a worldwide basis by working with Buy-in. So if some of you folks want to join some of these working groups where we are driving standards in this area, Buy-in, BIAN, is a great resource for you folks to be able to take a look at. Next slide. So the platform we have, right? If you look at the Neha's platform, it has tons of capabilities, and we have lots of use cases folks use to execute on the platform, right? Everything from managing the enterprise product and pricing strategy, where we are integrated with the core, offer management, where we actually deliver and fulfill all the offers that you might have, like the national checking account for some of our customers or any of their lending product offers. We have marketing compliance tools. We have marketing workflow, our business process automation there. We manage content and also kind of manage all the customer communications. So if somebody kind of logs into an application, and whatever disclosures they get after they log into the application is managed by our platform. Our focus today is going to be on disclosure management, but we wanted to give you a broad overview of some of the other use cases we manage on our platform. So let's get into the meat of the conversation about disclosures. Okay. So we're going to take you through a journey at, as I said, one of the top 4 banks in the country. And it's a very similar journey. Like this customer we can talk about is like First National Bank of Omaha also went through a similar type of journey, and they're more in kind of the tier 2 and tier 3 range. But it's a similar journey whether you are a regional institutions or you are a national organization. But this will give you a clear idea about what are the different paths they went through. So I think it falls down into, like, as we said, we'll talk about the why, right? Why they decide to go down this journey. And this we'll focus on what the current state at most of these organizations, at this organization was before they started down this journey. Then they wanted to talk about the what, right? Once they understood why they want to do that, then the next step was what, right? These are the vision and goals. What do they want to get accomplished? And if they accomplish that, would they have met the business goals they are starting out to, right? And we will suggest a vision to think about when we're thinking about disclosure management. Then we'll talk about the how, right? The actual process, the technology changes they made, how they thought about refactoring their disclosures, anything you need to know to actually execute on the how. And then finally, what did the transformation journey look like, right? What was the agile process, iterative process they used to start kind of delivering value for the business and for the internal employees all along the way as they went down the enterprise path. So our intention is to take you through this journey. And as we said before, right, if you have any questions and answers as we're going through this journey, feel free to ask for them along the way. Okay, so let's talk about the why. So I hate to say this, but a lot of the times the why starts with some fine or expectation of some fines around the products they have in the marketplace And generally, it is if they have not disclosed certain fees or they had denied some rewards based on the fact that somebody didn't read the right disclosure, right? So it's some combination of fines in this case that got that became an MRA, and then it became a self-identified risk within the organization that they needed to address as quickly as possible. Our advice to the group is, if you have not been hit by fines, my suggestion is please get ahead of this, because the fines are more painful than actually kind of solving this problem in a reasonable way before the fines show up. And we are seeing some customers really starting to take advantage of that. So once they realize that they had to do something, right? They did an analysis of how they compared against other folks who were doing disclosure management. They actually had hired a consulting organization. The consulting organization came to us. We worked with the consulting organization and did a benchmark with some of our customers that had already implemented disclosure management to understand where they stood, right? And the 7 or 8 things we looked at here is we looked at average cycle time. How long does it take you to make a change to a disclosure and get it created and deployed within all your channels and wherever it needs to be used, right? And worst in class is 10 to 12 weeks. Some people were even more than that. There was something like almost like 4 or 5 months. The process used to be, hey, there's a change to a product or change to a disclosure, then everybody sends that message out. You call a meeting together. Somebody has to write an Excel spreadsheet to say, okay, here are all the different places where this is going to impact, and then there's a whole project plan associated with this. And the best in class of our customers now do it within 1 week. They looked at is how much of this change management process or impact analysis is automated from an accuracy perspective, and how much requires a lot of manual processes. Degree of completeness of disclosures mapping to products and LOBs and offers. So this was an interesting one they were looking at. What they were looking at is, suppose there's a product change, how do I know which disclosures are mapped to this product? Or if there is a service change, an account change, or if there is an offer change, any change that might happen to my core products and services, what I'm selling, how quickly can I decide what disclosures impacted? Or the other impact analysis was, if there's a change to Reg Z, or if there's a change to any laws, how quickly can I decide which disclosures is going to be impact, right? So do they have the right data model in place? The degree of completeness of the taxonomy, right? All the metadata associated with this, number of repository. How many different repositories do you have? And we counted repositories. We found the most common repository was not some database, but the most common repository was a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet for most of the disclosures. Number of touch points to publish disclosures into your deployment channel, right? How many different ways you could deploy it? That was an interesting thing, right? Is there were many, like literally the number of touch points in some cases were in the hundreds, right? For even for every channel, there were 5 of different ways to get it into a channel, right? It was not channel specific. So if you had a mobile, it was a different way. If it was a web, it was a different way. If it was print, it was a different way. And forget print. If it was something that's like a service communication, they were doing it differently while they were doing for marketing stuff. That was impressive when we looked at the number of touch points they had to actually get the disclosures out. Documented roles and responsibilities for disclosures. Most folks didn't have clarity. Some people actually started building what is called a disclosure COE, and we'll talk about it as part of a process. But most folks did not know who was responsible for a certain disclosure. Was it the product organization that was responsible for these disclosures, and they were the folks, or there was the channel execution, or there was a marketing team? Most everybody would look at it and say, well, it'll feel like a joint responsibility if it meant that there was nobody really responsible. And the last one we took a look at was, what was the degree of disclosure consistency across channel? So if they made a change, did the disclosure was the same on the web versus the email versus what's sent out in a direct mail piece? Like, how consistent was the language in the disclosures across the way? And as you can say, as they compared it, in a lot of cases, at least this organization, they had a few averages, right? One average, which was disclosure consistency, where they spent an enormous amount of effort to do it. There was a whole team managing it on. I mean, it ended up being like tens of thousands of hours to kind of keep these up to date. But in other places, they were worst in class. So, and this is, as I said, one of the top 4 banks in the country that had this issue. So if you guys are struggling with this, you should not feel bad, because the same situation exists in many, many organizations in the country. So just to kind of, for us to get a feel for the audience about where you folks stand, we actually had created a poll, and Isabella is going to take you through the poll. And as we have the poll questions being answered, we will go through, we'll give you our commentary around that. So the 4 questions we have asked for is, what's your average cycle time, you think? 10 to 12 weeks. And if it's more than 10 to 12 weeks, that's okay. We didn't want to shame anybody. How many different repositories do you have? Number 3, how consistent are your disclosures across channels? Do you feel they're very consistent? They're not consistent? They're moderately consistent? And how would you rate your auditability and traceability? What do we mean by that, right? What that means by that, if an auditor came to you and said, hey, this customer received this disclosure, do you have a unique ID on it that you could track it all the way when these disclosures were delivered to the customer, in which channel, and you could work your way back and find it very easily. Now, what you will see is on this poll and quiz that you'll have to scroll down to answer question number 3 and 4. The top 2 you can already see. The other things you will have to scroll down. So, Isabel, how are we doing? Are people answering? Are we getting some information?
We're looking good. Maybe a couple more seconds for people to respond, and then we can share the results.
Okay. We seem to have a very engaged audience. They're getting right on top of it. That's great. And as always, folks, right? I mean, we want this to be as interactive as possible. If you have any questions that you would like us to address along the way, as we're having these questions, feel free to ask, right? About what these benchmark meant, how they went through. We want to make sure that you are getting them answered along the way. Don't hold back. As they say, they're only good questions.
All right, I'm gonna end the poll now, and then I will show you guys the responses.
All right. Drum roll. Look at that. Okay. Wow, that's impressive, actually, right? We have at least 1 in the 18 said that they can make disclosure changes 1 week to less. Hopefully, I think we had some of our customers here. That's hopefully one of our customers. Otherwise, we would love to know who has the 1 week of less. But most folks say that it takes them about a month or more to do this. And some of the folks are saying that it actually takes them 10 to 12 weeks. So very appropriate in terms of doing this. Then the other question is, does their organization use a centralized repository? Almost half, not half, about 75% are saying that we have 2 or 3 more repositories to manage all these disclosures. right? So that obviously means there's a lot of labor involved. So no different than what we see with our other customers. How, if you go to number 3, how do I, oh, here, I need to scroll. Great, okay. How consistent are your disclosures across channels, right? And I think moderately consistent is the right message. And the folks who are consistent, and if you don't have a single repository, right, it will take a lot of work to kind of keep them consistent along, especially if you have lots of channels or touch points to publish them out into the channels. And how would you rate your disclosure? So almost 78%, almost 80% have said that they have low or moderate in terms of auditability and traceability. And there's 22% that have said they're very high. So obviously, as you can see, there are folks who are going to cover the whole paradigm from doing this, but lots of opportunities for us to do a better job with disclosures in this market. So let's talk about now the what. And this is something that, but before we go in there, like, and then before so if you go to the next slide, thank you. Isabella, you're great, right? I won't go through all these details because there's so much language, right? But we have done an analysis of all the fines that have gone into this marketplace and looked at some of the trends that are happening, which is a surge in regulation, rising consumer expectations, and some of the digital transformation trends that are driven by making the customer experience better and better. We feel that some banks are risking about 5% of annual revenue from some sort of inadequate disclosures, whether it's with a product or an offer which gets them to deny the offer. So there is good ROI if we can go solve this problem on an ongoing basis. So as you think through the plans within your organization, some of this data can be useful for you to start building your ROI internally in your organizations. So this talks about the why you should do it. The next thing we were going to talk about the what, right? And Hayat, when she was at one of our customers, was responsible for actually defining this goal. So in this case, since she defined this, she'll be the right person to talk about it. So Hayat, up to you.
Yeah. So as Rab said, we have to the next slide.
Go to the next slide, yeah.
So the team has validated, the need for change, the need for transformation. So what, yeah. So the team, what they started to do, I can say also we, because I was part of this journey, was really to understand what is a vision, what are we striving for, how can we measure we achieving our vision, which are those measurable goals, and how do we do it? What strategy will build on it? So as you can see, the vision we came up with, we deliver trustworthy customer experiences through accurate, complete, and fully traceable disclosures. I want to point out is we kind of moved beyond compliance for disclosure. What it is central here is disclosure becomes a value driver for the bank at the core of their operations, because the disclosure now is a driver to enable creating confidence in the end consumer through transparency and accuracy. The other thing that was very critical for the team is traceable disclosures. It's not just, we know it's very critical for compliance and for auditing purposes, but it's also critical for fostering a team collaboration across all the different stakeholders in the organization. It's also critical because it enables you to quickly identify and correct issues or inconsistency across your channels at the source of where the content was created. So that's why this vision was really meant to inspire and engage stakeholders all across the organization. The other thing, to bring that vision to life, we need to have some set of goals. The first one we talked about is maintain trust with your customer, because they will create more, they will engage more with your business, they will trust you to do business with you. The second one, obviously, is trust with the regulatory. The second goal, which was really important, is not just about speed to market, it's speed to market at scale. What it meant really is like how the solution we will bring to life has to enable the bank to actually grow, to adapt to the changes of the market. As Rob was saying, there's lots of demand. There's demand for the banks to bring quicker product to the market, offers. But what it means is also an explosion of content to create, an explosion of disclosure to create. So we wanted to make sure that the solution will enable the bank to actually scale. And the third goal, which is also critical for the bank, is how do I ensure that the stakeholder experience is enhanced? As Rob said, and we were going through that benchmark analysis, they were creating a lot of frictions to create disclosure. You know, there was a lot of delays, a lot of hands-off, a lot of touch points. So the goal was to make sure we enabled the users to do their job easily and to actually perceive value as doing it. We're going to remove those friction. We're going to remove those busy work and repetitive tasks. So this is really how the team was thinking about building this solution and how to go about it. I think I'm going to give it back to Rob now.
Yeah, that was great. And then we had some metrics, right? That we did it. How many automation in the channels, right?
Yeah.
What was the modularity of the disclosures? And we'll talk about a little bit in the high, right? How happy were people when they deployed the disclosures? And once we go through the journey, we'll give you an update on where we ended up on some of these results and where they are still moving forward here. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, so let's talk about the how a little bit. Okay. So one of the key concepts we want to talk about is modularity of disclosures, right? A lot of your disclosures are currently stored within the final documents that you deliver to the end folks, right? So the first and foremost thing we do is we will rationalize your disclosure strategy, right? So what that means is we will take all the disclosures that you have and break them into modules, right? And the idea by breaking them into modules is that now we can now have these Lego blocks that we can use depending on your metadata and your product and offer strategy to be able to now assemble them on the fly, right? This is a critical part of the disclosure management journey we went through. So once we had gone, that was the first part of the process. And now, since we have done it for a lot of financial institutions, we actually have a very clear way of doing it, and we can come with an already existing structure and metadata to make it a lot easier for you folks to go down this journey. So if you go to the next slide, the next thing that was important is we want to get organized around, we need to get organized around what are the different ways to organize these disclosures, right? So the first question comes back is you have the simple thing what called content blocks. So when you have content blocks, this describes the specific content for the disclosures. Inside there, we'll talk about tokens, etc. But this is actually the specific content. The second part after the content blocks is what we call disclosure components. What disclosure components are is they are the content block with all the metadata and all the controls associated with the whole lifecycle management around that specific disclosure, right? The reason this is super critical is each disclosure component has its own life cycle, right? So a good example we have always used, right? Suppose you have Apple Pay, and you are making a change to Apple Pay. All the disclosures that go with Apple Pay needs to be managed independently of changes that might be happening with other disclosures. And once all the disclosures have kind of moved to approved status, then you can publish them out to be used in different disclosure sets, right? So you have your content blocks that actually provides the content, and you would have, as I said, multiple languages for each content block. The disclosure components kind of manages all the metadata associated with those disclosures and the life cycle around those disclosures. There is disclosure sets that shows how I'm going to put disclosures for a specific product or a specific type of document. And then finally, you actually have the document or the experience, I should probably call it the disclosure experience, that the person will actually see, right? So this is where you take the group of disclosures and you render that using the specific template that is needed to show the disclosure across all the channels, right? So that means is content blocks is where the language is, disclosure components where you manage the life cycle of each individual disclosure. Then you have the disclosure sets, which is group, and then you have disclosure documents where you apply the template so that you create the final experience for the customer.
We have a question on the Q&A.
Yes, in the Q&A. So one of the questions folks asked is, how different is this from AEM fragments? Great question, because we integrate with Adobe on an ongoing basis. So what we find is there are few kind of nuances that are really important, right? For example, how do you manage the life cycle of these disclosures, get everybody to adopt and approve them? And then how do you manage it across omni-channel? And when we mean omni-channel, it has to kind of work, the same disclosure has to work across email, direct mail, print, and everything else. So there's some kind of nuances on it. But generally what we find is that folks kind of manage the disclosure and disclosure set. And when they're ready to deploy that into the channel, that's where we kind of end up integrating with AEM fragments, right? If it's kind of mobile. So the AEM fragments get kind of used more during the delivery phase, but not during the auditing, creating all the phase, because of all the different stakeholders involved, which could be legal, it could be the product group, right? Etc. Hope that answered the question. Right? To be able to do that. Any other questions before we get going about how do we define the different components as part of this, the nomenclature around it? So last thing we'll talk about is, now what happens is, suppose I see a document, a disclosure document, like generally a disclosure document will have a very specific ID that will tie itself to a disclosure set, right? So with that specific ID, you'll be able to go to the version of the disclosure set that was actually deployed into the channel. And then from the disclosure set, you'll be able to see the version of the disclosure component and the specific content block that was used, right? So you'll be able to work the auditability and traceability all the way back. And then the last thing we want to talk about before we jump into it is the concept of personalized disclosure. So what will happen is, suppose you do create these disclosures, but in some cases, for some of our customers, you have to deliver a personalized disclosure when somebody signs up on an application. So in that case, you then need to personalize the disclosures with the person's specific information, the specific offer they might have had, or the specific product they have used and deliver it to the customer in like 200 milliseconds or less, right? So less than a second, blink of an eye back to them. So you need to, for certain use case, you need to also think to that and how this will get integrated. Now, if you go to the next slide, so what does the blueprint look like, right? What are the different components that go into a disclosure? So what you'll see is on the left-hand side, you have all the different folks that might be involved in understanding the impact of a change, right? You might have product folks, you would have marketing folks, you might have digital folks, and you definitely have legal and compliance folks, right? So all of these folks are stakeholders that need to work together to understand the impact of a change, right? With specific roles and responsibilities identified for every disclosure, right? Every disclosure will be owned by either a set of product folks or a set of marketing folks or somebody in digital or somebody in legal. And they work in this modular disclosure system of record, right? This is where you have the taxonomy, the metadata, the reusable content lifecycle, all the QoC, and they work in that modular disclosures SSOT to be able to do the work. Once they have done the work and things are approved, these can go into what is called a dynamic disclosure assembly methodology, right? So then we'll take those disclosure sets that we have talked about and start assembling the final document or the final experience that is needed for each channel, right? And the disclosure experience could be either a part of the experience, right? Because they already have the email done and they just need the disclosures that go with the email, or it could be a complete disclosure document. And then that disclosure experience is then delivered into the channel in an automated way. So that means is the ideal situation is you make a change, the change gets approved. Once the change gets approved and the library is kind of approved state, the system should automatically be able to create the set, the experience, somebody approves the experience, and then it can be deployed within the channel. And so the channel is always up to date with the latest disclosures at any moment in time if it's a digital and online channel. If obviously it's a print channel, that the next time the print production goes out, it's using the latest and greatest disclosures without having any issues. And then finally, in some cases, if there's personalization, right? Somebody goes to the website or does an application, it goes to the dynamic disclosure assembly and orders that up. And obviously, the UIs and ability for everybody to have collaborative review and approval workflow all the way through this process. And then finally, you need for the solution traceability and analytics. So anybody should be able to come to you and you should be very quickly be able to audit what's necessary to go make that happen. So we talked about how do you break the disclosures down? Then we talked about what are the main components of what the process looks like, and then what are the main components of the technology, right? And obviously, the first place to get started off with is your modular disclosure SSOT that you're controlling, and then finding some disclosure library to be able to do that work. So as they deploy it now, right? So that's the blueprint. So if you go to the next slide, thank you. Hayat will talk through the transformation, right? Because the reason this is important is sometimes it's easy to get caught into just the process and the work, and it takes a long time to deliver value. So Hayat will, as she implemented this at this institution, and now she's implemented at multiple places here, she'll tell you some of the principles we have used.
Yeah, thank you, Rab. So before even starting building the execution plan, to bring to life this solution, the team get together and to really think about some key principles that they have established to make sure it will inform their roadmap. So as you can see, we have 5 key principles. I'm just going to go today for 3 that are really pertinent to the goals that we were trying to achieve at the time. The first one is really what I called focus on users, not silos, because what we found out through the discovery is the work was being done through so many numerous teams that were working in isolation. And this led to having those long, slow processes, inconsistent processes. It's also led to have very limited visibility in the impact of the work from each team. That will then drive to, obviously, a lower quality output. So by focusing on the user, we took a user design approach where we will look at the user needs and we'll build the workflow, the journey around their needs. And this was instrumental because it really enabled the team to really foster that collaboration that was really needed and to really break into the silos. So it was very successfully well done.
So Hayat, Marcelo from the audience is a great straight person for you. So Marcelo asked the question is, how are reloops addressed in approval granting process? Scenario legal approves and compliance had changes to the approved disclosures. What happens? Will the approval process reloop? So I think what Hayat is talking about, right? This is a classic example of adopting a user-centric workflow. So the way we solved for that problem over here was you want them to collaborate. It shouldn't be a linear process, right? Legal, right? The way the system was set up is legal could look at compliance, right? These things were happening in one place where they could see each other's comments, the changes that were made. So it was not a process that you had to go through multiple loops of process, right? Because that's the current process, right? Somebody gets a document, they kind of make changes, so then it goes to the next person, then the next person makes changes, then the legal person doesn't agree with it. So that's why we need to go through, get away from the silos and go to a more collaborative user-centric workflow.
Yeah,
So,
and really transparency, as you were saying, Rab, because what we enable is really understanding the rationale, why that changed, why legal thought it was right, and why compliance actually disagree on it. So they could collaborate, as Rab said, in one platform, and they had that full transparency, which was really critical, and which expedite, obviously, the process to complete the disclosure change management.
couldn't agree more, yeah. So great question, Marcelo.
Thank you, yeah.
Keep on coming.
Yeah, let me know. So the other one I wanted to, because I know we don't have so much time, but the other one I really wanted to focus on is build in steps and create value as early as you can. Because what's happening, obviously, we cannot bring the change all at once. Yeah, it's just too disturbing. So the team really thought about how can I bring the change gradually and ensure I'm adding value all along the way, because this is instrumental to, first of all, validate your solution and your direction, but also to get engagement and to get momentum. So that's what the team has been really focusing on when they were building their roadmap. The other principle I really wanted to highlight is what I call prioritize key outcomes over incremental improvements. This was really key because sometimes we tend to forget what is our vision and those key outcomes we're striving for. And by having that always in our mind, in our agenda, it helps you really to innovate the solution. Because what happened, for instance, what we talked about, speed to market at scale, and Rob talked about that mapping of the disclosure to the business, to the line of business, to the product, to the offer, to the channels. It's true, it's time consuming, you're going to think, because you're going very slow to move fast, actually. So what happened by doing this work, which was kind of innovative work for this bank, they were able to quickly then do a change impact analysis, because they will know where that change is going to be affected, which documents, which content blocks, which channel. And also it enabled them to feel peace of mind, because as you can see, we can reuse those content, but you want to make sure when you make that change, what will be impacted, and is it the right change you will make? So these principles were really critical for building the roadmap, for guiding the journey. But also I wanted to say it's not just rules, like we're looking at it, because you can tell those principles was also driving the transformation on how the team was working. So this was really critical for us.
Yeah, I think I mean, I couldn't agree more on the outcome side, right? I remember, right? Because what happens is we had a great vision, right? In this situation, we had a great vision, and now you get into execution mode. And the people working in execution mode, they said, you know what? Hey, can you just change? I just want to change this kind of incremental change because that's what I'm used to. I don't really want to think about what the key outcomes are. And there was always this discussion, yeah, you can make this incremental change, but it's not going to really move the needle in a significant way. To really get to the outcome, this is what we need to do. So the change management, I remember a lot of those conversations, right? So couldn't agree more with that, Hayat. So
Thank
if,
you.
yeah,
Any questions? No, no questions.
no questions right now. Looks like you're doing a great job.
I hope I don't speak too fast. So the next slide, please. So this is a roadmap. It's kind of busy, but I just wanted to, first of all, before even starting there, I wanted to say that one of the key things the team wanted to do is make sure that change is sustainable. And in order to do that, they decided actually to adopt an agile mindset. What it means is basically they look at the work and they broke it into smaller chunks. So what you see here on the right side, MVP 1, 2, 3, what they did is actually trying to look at what we needed to do. Let's break it in smaller chunks, smaller MVPs, and each MVP will deliver value to our stakeholder. That's kind of the way they were looking at building the roadmap. The other thing that was really important when they built the roadmap is having this mindset of test and learn. So they can iterate, they can validate the solution, or they can find out that actually based on the learning, they need to adjust, they need to pivot. They had that flexibility. That was really important because we actually did few turnaround, realizing that was not the right thing we wanted to do because we wanted actually to get to those great outcomes. And some of the changes we thought will work will not give us that scalability we were looking for. And then the other thing they did is really building the roadmap around 3 phases. As you can see on the left side, phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 is all about core foundations. How do I make sure I establish the right foundations and removing all complexity? Like, for instance, channel integration is kind of complex to start with. So what they did is really looking at the core personas, the core workflow, and starting building the solution. And then phase 2 was all about expansion. So what it was is really, let's add more persona to interact with a new solution. Let's add more complexity to the workflows. Let's add actually 1 or 2 channels we can automate and see how it goes. We learn the patterns. And let's also add some new feature, more advanced. For instance, we talked about those modular content blocks. How do we make sure we're creating modular content blocks that are reusable? How do we make sure we don't have similar content blocks? So we use other features that enable you to look at similar content block and decide to rationalize or not. So this is really key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? And I think Hayat, one of the key things what you said was in phase 1, they didn't need to involve kind of any integration or IT resources and anything, folks, right? We could actually kind of start delivering value to the business because they could actually start using this process. They still use for automation some of their old processes to deliver that into the channel. And then once we were able to prove the value to the business, then it was easy to get the IT team and everybody to allocate and prioritize resources to actually do the automation, right? Starting on the automation early actually was that was one of the changes we made, right? Initially, they want to automate early, and we said, no, like getting the IT team will be hard. So I remember that. That was good.
Yeah, great. Yeah. In phase 3, what is it? It's
Yeah.
doing full automation, comprehensive integration with all the other application, internal consuming channels. It's also learning about the data because now we have more data. So we use it for more reactive measure. Now let's be more predictive, more proactive, so we can really adapt to the changes of the organization. So that's where we are. And that's that roadmap really enable us to drive value, to maintain engagement, to bring more engagement from the different stakeholders. And now Rob is going to share with you some of the outcomes that have been able to achieve.
That's been amazing, right? And I think they won't be too surprising to you, right? But if you go to the next slide, right? If you go to the next slide, it'll kind of become very clear, right? So this is the most interesting thing. When we looked at all the disclosure fragments on the disclosure components, when we started with, there were 10,000 plus different components, some with slightly different changes. And this is for a bank that now has all the different lines of businesses, every lending business, every wealth management business, every commercial business, right? And now they're down from 10,000 plus, it was much more than that, to 1,300 disclosure components that can kind of address almost all their needs. They went from 8 to 1. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities, percentage of disclosures adopting new process, 90%, right? For one use case, they went from 12 weeks to actually deploying this within 3 days, right? This, by the way, this is not consistent across all use cases because other use cases are different processes, but in almost cases, there were a 70 to 80% increases in this. Number of rejections from legal and compliance went from 22% to 0%, right? So they were rejecting this, but now since everybody was collaborating it didn't at the end of the process, they didn't, so we are rejecting this, you need to start the process because the collaboration did. Internal risk audit findings, that's what they were most kind of excited about, went from about 10 they were doing on a quarterly basis, went down to 0. Number of automated deployment were all manual. Now they have greater than 15 channels that are in automated deployment. Utilization, 80% cross-utilization of the taxonomy and metadata. Change impact analysis has been huge, right? This has been a journey, right? Required a lot of changes, etc. But ability to manage risk, increase efficiency, and really drive innovation within this organization went up at a senior level. And over the years, now the organization is getting better and better about kind of getting to products. Like the most important thing is by solving the disclosure problem, which was the critical path item, they're able to get offers and products and services to the market actually faster, right? Like they had invested in some of the technology, in some cases with us, and then they found out they were still limited. But by solving this problem, now they were able to get to product a lot faster overall from a market perspective. So based on this analysis, I'm going to go through this. If you go to the next slide, Isabella, based on this analysis, we have come up with like 4 levels of maturity, right? In this model, right? So I'll quickly go through the cases, right? Disclosure data model and metadata. Disclosure modularization. Single source of truth. Disclosure assembly. Omnichannel delivery. Disclosure auditability and traceability. And then you have an integrated disclosure QA and QC environment, right? Level 1 is mostly primary, you have static disclosures, doing everything manually. Level 2, you start having modular disclosure, but there's not a single source of truth. It's mostly done or at an organization level, so it's broken up by the different LOBs. Semi-automated template-based assembly, right? And you might have some automated compliance check, but still automated but disparate tagging, right? So you go from completely manual to having some modular disclosure, but more for LOB or organizational specific processes. Level 3 is when you start integrating it together, you go to a centralized disclosure management system. Things are much, much more automated. So if I make a change to a corporate disclosure, it can be used in any part of the business. If I make a change to any specific disclosure, it can be deployed very, very quickly. And then finally, we have level 4. I would say the best customer we have is in level maybe 3.2. We still don't have a customer at level 4, but there is desire for customers to get to level 4, where you can actually use generative AI for scalable content creation, right? Self-learning repositories for workflow. You can do predictive analysis to see for preemptive compliance, right? You don't have to, the system will be able to tell you. And then a continuous learning process to be put into place. So that's kind of ultimate. We have folks at level 3, we have folks at level 2, we have folks at level 1. So Isabella, for the last thing, and this is the last poll we'll have you take, right? Love for you to give us an idea is, what do you think from an organization perspective? Are you at level 1, level 2, level 3? And if somebody's level 4, I want to know who that person is, because I want to come learn from you if that exists. That would be that'll be fantastic because we're gonna hold you up at the folks who are best in class in the whole world. But we would love to kind of get your perspective about where you stand in this area. And again, as folks have specific questions, please ask as we go through this. More than happy to answer any questions you might have.
There is one.
All right. So the question is, while you're doing it, is it a best practice with the system to have a gatekeeper group managing the input output of the system, or it is decentralized better? Great question, Marcelo. Couple of things what we have found. Folks have started creating what is called a disclosure COE, right? So this is a center of excellence that sometimes exists either in the, folks have put it in the ops organization, other folks have put it in the marketing organization. And this disclosure COE is the one that is driving, kind of keeping all the other parties in check. Now, the question we have asked ourselves is this a heavy disclosure COE or it is a light disclosure COE? So we think the best practice is that you need a few people to be the disclosure COE, but if you can assign the responsibilities to the people who actually own the products, own the offers, and they take responsibility for those disclosures, with the disclosure COE being responsible for the process and the platform, that we find is the most efficient process. But you're definitely going to need a few people to help you manage this process and run that. That's the conclusion we came to. Completely decentralized didn't work, and then completely did not work to be able to do this. So, okay. So we didn't get a level 4. Otherwise, I really want to meet that person. But we have some folks at level 3, which is one of the 18 who said that. But most of the folks are kind of in level 1 and level 2. So our answer to you folks is the fact that you come to the webinar, you are well on your journey to be smart about how you want to drive this. And we are here, if you look at the next slide, to help you. Reach out to us, right, at marketing@nehas.com. We have a calculator, like a lot of the things we talked about. We have a benefits calculator so that we can very quickly, you can answer a few questions and we can assess the value of advancing your disclosure strategies so you can quickly get to the why. And obviously, we are very happy to deep dive into a topic and take you and help you, if nothing else, be the person who you can vent on all the pain and suffering, because we have gone through the same thing with other customers. So if nothing else, we'll be a great year for both of us to talk about together. So with that, we finished it exactly on time. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience, asking some great questions, especially Marcelo. And we look forward to hearing from you. So with that, we'll hand it over to Isabella just in time.
Thank you so much, Rav, and thank you, Hayat. And of course, thank you to all of today's participants. With that, we must conclude our program. The session has been recorded and will be available within 1 to 2 business days. On behalf of CBA, thank you again to our speakers and everyone who joined. Have a great afternoon, and you may now disconnect.
Thank you so much.